The reading is taken from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, verses 43 to 52. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. This is the word of the Lord.
Given that today is the feast of St. Valentine, I'm tempted to give this section of Mark's Gospel the title, Sealed with a Kiss. But that would be very dark, wouldn't it? Because this is not a kiss of love, but a kiss of betrayal. What it seals is the arrest of Jesus and his subsequent condemnation and death. Also, I'm not really that interested in Judas. We already know, reading up to this point in the Gospel, how treacherous he is. We already know that we're nothing like him, are we? He doesn't serve as a lesson or a warning to us because we'd never behave that way. He's not that interesting, so I don't want to offer a title which puts him up front and foremost. I'm much more interested in someone else in this scene, to be honest, in terms of what I can learn from it, and we'll get to him soon. But I think I want to give this the title, Not Covered in Glory. Well, how good is your imagination? Can you imagine the scene? We're in the Garden of Gethsemane, a place where olive trees grow, just across the Kidron Valley from Jerusalem, not far up the Mount of Olives. It is properly nighttime now. It's dark, although I guess there must have been a fullish moon in the night sky, given that it was near to Passover. The Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is there. He's not in the best state ever. I think he's actually on the brink of a mental breakdown, walking down the Kidron Valley that night, a place which is lined with graves. Then, as it is now, the reality of his impending death was pressing down on him. Luke tells us that sweat was pouring from his head so profusely that it was coming out as blood would if you had a cut. If Jesus ever needed friends, then he needed them now. Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is there. The disciples are there somewhere. The 12, minus Judas, who had already left earlier in the evening, so I suppose I should probably call them the 11. Arriving at the garden sometime before, Jesus had asked them to sit and wait while he prayed. He'd singled out Peter, James and John, who he had taken further into the garden and had asked them to keep watch. They had witnessed his distress that night. Even so, rather than keeping watch, they had slept. Garden of Gethsemane, the disciples were there. And suddenly, someone else is coming, a crowd of someone else's, making their way across the valley in the dark, coming from the direction of the city. You see their torches burning in the darkness. You sense the menace in their approach. It only takes a few minutes and then they're there with you at Gethsemane. Judas steps forward and kisses Jesus on the cheek, identifying him in the darkness to the armed authorities. There's a small scuffle. Someone gets an ear chopped off. Jesus points out that he's not exactly been hiding over the last few days, and they could have arrested him at any time. And then we get to the point, which is probably the most chilling observation in Mark's account of this incident. It's there in verse 50, which says that everyone deserted him and fled. And the way Mark has phrased it in the Greek sentence that he's written for us, it's clear that everyone is emphasised. Not so smooth, but perhaps we could write it like this. Then they deserted him and fled. Everyone. Underlined and put in bold. Everyone. Well, who is this everyone? Well, mostly the 12, or the 11, should I say, the closest friends of Jesus. Everyone. But hold on, just a few hours before, according to Mark, they'd sat in an upper room and had eaten a meal together, and at the meal, everyone had shared in the cup that Jesus had passed around. And at that meal, everyone had declared that they would rather die than disown him. Here's the everyone again. They deserted him and fled. Everyone. I don't know how easy you find it to imagine the scene. You have to travel 2,000 miles and 2,000 years, I know. But if you can imagine yourself in the scene, where would you be in all honesty? Would you still be there with Jesus as the arresting crowd begins to lead him away? Or would you have fled along with everyone else? There is still somebody there, as it happens. We meet him in verse 51, where we are told that he is a certain young man and that he is wearing a linen sheet. So who is he, this certain young man? His manner of dress suggests that he had not come from the dinner party of the Last Supper. He's not one of the 12. Perhaps he lived nearby and has come out to see what was going on. No one really knows, of course. The most common speculation is that this is Mark himself, the author of the Gospel, painting himself into a corner of the narrative in the way that Alfred Hitchcock often gave himself a cameo appearance in his own films. That could explain why Mark includes this little incident, whereas Matthew and Luke both leave it out. It's certainly quirky. Dr. Alfred Plummer, who wrote a good solid commentary on Mark's Gospel in 1913, which is still useful and which, by the way, you can get on Amazon for Kindle for 77 pence at the moment. Dr. Plummer wrote this: "This strange incident has so little to do with the narrative and is so out of harmony with the tone of it that we wonder why it has been inserted." But I wonder whether it really is that much out of harmony with the tone of the narrative. See, if I try to put myself into the scene, I find it hard to imagine myself as one of the 12 disciples. They're much more important than I am, it feels to me. I don't identify with Judas. I honestly don't think I would have betrayed Jesus. Could I have done that? I feel really as though I don't actually belong in the scene at all, until I notice this ordinary bloke, not a key figure in any way. He's just come out to have a look. I'm much more like him, although I have to say I have a considerably more substantial wardrobe, and I'm not sure that you can really call me a young man anymore. Anyway, he runs away too. Verses 51, 52, a young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. One commentator has written this: whoever he was, he's not depicted as a hero, he's not exactly covered in glory, which I have to say provokes the thought that he's not particularly covered in very much at all. But look, if this is the author of the Gospel, he's actually making a very gentle point. Chapter 14 of Mark's Gospel is all about the abandonment of Jesus, stage by stage, by all of those who have sworn allegiance to him. And this is of a piece with all of that. And Mark is saying that he was no better than anyone else that night. He's not going to stand in judgment over the others for their cowardice. But he is warning us gently that falling away is something that could happen to any of us. Abandoning Jesus is within the capability of us all. And I guess this is especially so at a time when we can't even meet together to encourage each other to keep going. I find some words which Paul wrote at the end of his first letter to the Corinthians come to my mind. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. Perhaps that's the message we should take away this Valentine's Day as we reflect on the arrest of Jesus and on how easy it seems to be to abandon him. Please, Lord, don't let my place in this scene be with the everyone of verse 50.